It all started on a Tuesday. I remember the day vividly because of the rain. It wasn't a cleansing storm, but one of those dreary, relentless drizzles that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. I was in the kitchen, humming a low tune to myself, trying to perfect a new beef stew recipe for Richard. I had spent 4 hours on it, carefully searing the meat and letting it simmer until the vegetables were tender enough to melt on your tongue. Richard's stomach had been acting up lately, stress from the merger, he said, and I had spent weeks researching gentle, nourishing foods that wouldn't aggravate his condition. I thought if I could just take care of him perfectly, if I could be the flawless wife he needed, maybe, just maybe, he would finally really see me. The front door opened. He came home early that day. He didn't have his usual leather briefcase, just a crisp manila envelope clutched in his hand. He didn't even take off his rain-soaked coat, dripping water onto the hardwood floors I had just polished. He just stood there in the doorway of the kitchen, looking at me not like a wife, but like a stranger, or worse, an employee he was about to let go. "Natalie," he said. His voice was flat, completely devoid of any emotion. He walked over and slid the envelope across the granite countertop. It stopped right next to the cutting board where I had been chopping fresh parsley. "Let's get a divorce." The knife clattered from my hand onto the counter. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been physically punched out of my lungs. The smell of the savory stew suddenly made me feel nauseous.
"What?"
"Richard, what are you talking about?" I stammered, wiping my hands on my apron as if cleaning them would somehow clean up this mess. He sighed, a sound of pure impatience, like he was dealing with a slow child. "Sign this agreement. Our lawyer drafted it this morning. It's generous. I'll give you an extra $20 million on top of what the original prenuptial contract stipulates. But you need to sign it today." "The contract," I whispered. "Of course. How could you forget? Our marriage wasn't a romance, Natalie. It was a business deal. 3 years. Set to expire in exactly 1 month." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had foolishly hoped he would forget about the end date. I had hoped that the life we had built, or rather, the life I had built for him, would mean something. I thought the way I managed his schedule, the way I nursed him back to health when he had the flu, the way I hosted his dull business dinners with a smile, I thought it all amounted to love. "If you don't agree now," he continued, his voice as cold as the rain outside, checking his watch, "the contract will end automatically in a month anyway. But then you won't get a dime of the extra $20 million. Think of it as a severance package. It's a good deal." A severance package. That's what I was to him. An employee being laid off. My hands were trembling so hard I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. I looked at this well-dressed, handsome man I had loved for 7 years, for years from afar as an intern, and 3 years as his wife, and I felt a wave of desperation, so strong it made me dizzy. I had one last card to play. It was a secret I had been holding close for a week, a little spark of joy I was waiting for the perfect moment to share. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the miracle that could save us. "Richard," I whispered, my voice cracking. "What if I told you? I was pregnant. I admit it. I was desperate. I was trying to use the child to keep him." Richard's family was old money, obsessed with legacy and inheritance, but they didn't have many heirs. A child, his child, would change everything. For the sake of the baby, for the sake of his family's dynasty, maybe he would give up this insane idea of a divorce. He didn't even flinch. His eyes, the color of cold steel, met mine. There was no joy, no surprise. Just a dark, cynical amusement. And then he delivered the final, fatal blow. "I had a vasectomy," he said. Each word was a perfectly polished stone dropped into a silent pool. "Right after we got married. The child can't be mine." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. A vasectomy? It wasn't possible. Richard was the only man I had ever been with. I had given him everything. My youth, my loyalty, my body. If the child wasn't his, whose was it? The question hung in the air. A vile, unspoken accusation. He was calling me a cheater. He was calling me a liar. In that moment, looking at his sneering face, I realized something profound. When someone doesn't believe you, any explanation is useless. His words had built a wall between us that I could never hope to climb. "You're lying?" I gasped, tears finally spilling over. "I've never been with anyone else." He just checked his watch again. "Spare me the drama, Natalie. I have a dinner appointment. Read the papers. You have 24 hours. He turned and left, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the smell of cooling stew, the half-chopped parsley, and the divorce papers that felt like a death certificate for the life I thought I had. I sank to the floor, the cold tile sending a shock through my legs, wrapping my arms around my stomach where a tiny, innocent life was growing, a life its own father had just rejected before he even knew it existed. As I sat on the cold kitchen floor, the silence of the large, empty house amplified the ringing in my ears. My mind drifted back, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. But the truth was, the whole thing was a mess right from the start. My story didn't begin 3 years ago at the altar. It began much earlier, in the shadow of my sister, Valery. In my family, Valery was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets orbiting her brilliance. She was beautiful, charismatic, and effortlessly captured everyone's attention. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one. The one who liked dirt and plants more than galas and diamonds. I became a landscape architect because I preferred the company of trees to people.
3 years ago, the woman who was supposed to marry Richard wasn't me. It was Valery. It was the merger of the century. My father's real estate empire and Richard's investment firm needed to unite to secure a massive market share. A marriage was the quickest way to solidify the trust. Richard, the eligible bachelor CEO, and Valery, the socialite princess. It was perfect. But Valery was spoiled. She craved excitement, passion, and drama, things Richard, with his calculated demeanor and workaholic tendencies, didn't provide. Days before the wedding, she vanished. She left a note saying she was chasing her true love, a bohemian painter she had met at an art gallery. She fled the country, leaving our family facing a scandal that would have tanked the stock prices of both companies. To avoid the humiliation, to keep the massive business deal afloat, my parents had looked at me. "Natalie," my mother had said, gripping my hand with a force that hurt. "You have to do this. For the family. You've always been the responsible one." They offered me up as a replacement. The substitute daughter. The spare tire. Richard's family, concerned only with appearances and the merger, agreed. As long as it was a daughter from our family, the contract held. And me? Why did I agree? Because I was a fool. I had been nursing a secret crush on Richard since I was 22, fresh out of college and interning at his firm's botanical garden project. I used to watch him from the greenhouse, admiring his focus, his intensity. I saw kindness in him that perhaps wasn't really there, imagining that his polite nods were signs of deep connection. So, when they asked, I saw it as a dream come true. A chance to step out of the shadows and be the leading lady for once. I said yes. The only unwilling person in this whole arrangement, apparently, was Richard. I don't know what other people's wedding nights are like. I imagine champagne, laughter, intimacy. Mine was spent watching Richard toss a thick document onto the pristine white comforter of our hotel suite. "I don't mix business with pleasure," he had said, loosening his tie without even looking at me. "You are here to save your father's company. I am here to secure the merger. This is a 3-year contract. We will maintain separate bedrooms. You will manage the household and appearances. In 3 years, we reassess." He took a pillow and went to sleep in the suite study. I felt lost and pained, standing there in my expensive lace nightgown, feeling ridiculous. But I didn't give up. I thought, 3 years is a long time. I thought if I just treated him well, if I loved him enough for both of us, he would warm up to me. I thought my quiet, steady devotion could outshine Valery's flighty brilliance. For 3 years, I was his shadow, his caretaker, his personal assistant. He had stomach issues, so I studied nutrition and became a gourmet chef of bland, soothing foods. He had migraines from staring at screens, so I learned acupressure, waiting up until 2 a.m. to massage his temples until he fell asleep. I organized his closet, bought gifts for his clients, and memorized his schedule better than his actual secretary. In hindsight, I was so naive. Who falls in love with their live-in nanny? Who respects a doormat? I was a fool. We were just torturing each other. He looked at me and saw a contractual obligation. I looked at him and saw a husband. My hand trembled as I reached for the divorce papers on the floor. The ink blurred through my tears. Irreconcilable differences. Termination of contract. I spent 7 years loving you, I whispered to the empty room. 4 years in silence, 3 years in servitude. And all it was worth to him was a severance package. The suddenness of it all still didn't make sense, though. Why now? The contract had a month left. Why the urgency? Why the sudden offer of $20 million to sign today? Richard was stingy. He wouldn't throw away money unless he was desperate to clear the decks for something else. Or someone else. As if on cue, my phone rang, shattering the silence. The screen flashed with a picture of my mother. I wiped my face, taking a deep breath to steady my voice before swiping to answer. Hello, Mom? Natalie, darling. Her voice was unusually cheerful, practically bubbling with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. Guess what? You need to come home for dinner tonight. It's a special occasion. What's happening? I asked, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. Your sister is back, she announced, oblivious to the thunderclap happening in my heart. Valery's flight landed this afternoon. She's home. Valery is back? I repeated, my voice hollow. My blood ran cold. Of course. It all made perfect sense now. My mom sighed dramatically into the phone, the sound crackling in my ear. Oh, I always knew that artist fellow was no good. But you know your sister, so stubborn. Turns out after they ran off to Italy, his true colors showed. He was fooling around with other women, spending all her money. Even when Valery was sick, he didn't care. Poor thing. My heart gave a painful lurch, not of sympathy, but of recognition. My sister had been betrayed. Just like I was being betrayed right now. But unlike me, she had a safety net. She finally came to her senses and left him, my mom continued, her voice brightening again. She's been so fragile, Natalie. We need to support her. Richard is coming too, of course. I already called him. Richard knows? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Oh yes, he was the first one she called when she landed, Mom said breezily. Listen, don't bring up the past when you see her. Don't mention the wedding or the scandal. Don't upset her. She needs her family right now. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, staring at the black screen. It all clicked into place. The pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving slammed together. The sudden divorce demand. The generous cash offer. The urgency. It wasn't about the contract expiring next month. It was about Valery. She was back. The main character had returned to the story, and I felt like I was living in a book I had read before. Valery was the heroine, flawed, beautiful, forgiven. And I? I was just the supporting character. The placeholder. The understudy who kept the show running while the star was on break. My role was to keep her seat warm, care for her man, fix his stomach, manage his home, and then gracefully exit stage left when she returned. The book's plot even flashed in my mind, mocking me. Valery, likely unable to have children or just unwilling to ruin her figure, would probably eventually adopt my child if I told them about it, and I would watch them live happily ever after as a perfect family.
I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Was I going crazy? But in that moment of strange, surreal clarity, something inside me snapped. The 7 years of love I had for Richard curdled into something cold and hard. It sat heavy in my chest, like lead. I looked at the divorce papers on the counter. Why should I step aside? Why should I sign these papers just because Valery decided she was done with her European fling? Why should I let them have their happy ending on the ashes of my life?
No.
I wasn't going to be the tragic, forgotten supporting character anymore. If they wanted me to be the villain of this story, the obstacle in their path, then fine. I would be the best damn villain they had ever seen. Before this divorce was over, I was going to make them uncomfortable.
I was going to make them pay.
I stood up. I didn't sign the papers. Instead, I went upstairs to my dressing room. Usually for family dinners, I wore modest beige colors. I tried to blend in, to look like the respectable, boring wife Richard wanted. Not tonight. I pulled out a dress I had bought on impulse and never worn, a deep emerald green silk that hugged every curve. I applied red lipstick, dark and sharp. I put on the diamond earrings Richard had given me as a contract renewal bonus last year. I wasn't going there to cry. I was going there to fight. I took a cab to my parents' estate, my heart pounding with a strange, terrifying new energy. The rain was still pouring, turning the world into a blur of gray and black. I arrived just as Richard's sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb. I watched through the rain-streaked window of my taxi. He got out, opening a large black umbrella. And then the passenger door opened. Valery stepped out. She looked more worn out than I remembered. The vibrant spark in her eyes was dimmed, and she was thinner, frilier. But she was still Valery. She had that magnetic pull, the center of gravity, in any room. My parents immediately rushed out of the front door, fussing over her, their faces etched with concern. Valery. Oh, my poor baby, my mother cried, ignoring the rain. I watched as Richard held the umbrella over Valery, shielding her perfectly. He was leaning in, saying something soft to her. The rain was soaking his left shoulder, ruining his expensive Italian suit, but he didn't seem to care. He always walked ahead of me. He never held an umbrella for me. He would just hand me one and walk at his own pace. But for her, he was her shield. I pushed down the familiar sting of disappointment and replaced it with steel. I paid the taxi driver and stepped out into the downpour. I didn't open my own umbrella. I let the rain hit me. I walked right up to them, my heels clicking on the wet pavement. Honey, I cooed, my voice loud enough to cut through the sound of the rain. I walked straight past my parents, past Valery, and latched onto Richard's wet arm. I pressed my body against his, ignoring the stiffness that instantly shot through his frame. How did your clothes get so wet? I asked, looking up at him with wide, worried eyes, clinging to him affectionately. Valery's gaze shot over to us. Her eyes went wide, then vacant, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Richard tried to pull his arm away, gritting his teeth. Natalie, what are you doing? But I held on tight. You're the backbone of the company, Richard. You can't get sick. Your stomach is already so sensitive. Let's go inside. I smiled at Valery, a dazzling, predatory smile. Welcome home, sister. You look tired. Don't worry, Richard, and I will take care of everything. The tension in the foyer was thick enough to choke on. My parents were fluttering around Valery like she was made of spun glass, taking her coat, asking if she needed tea, a blanket, a therapist. Nobody asked me how I was. Nobody noticed I was dripping wet, ruining my silk dress. Richard was trying to peel me off his arm without causing a scene, but I dug my fingers into his bicep. Let's go upstairs and get you dried off, honey, I insisted, steering him toward the grand staircase. You kept some spare suits in my old room, remember? I could see the vein pulsing on his forehead, the frantic struggle in his eyes as he tried to maintain his composure. But in front of our family, he had to preserve his image as a husband. He couldn't shove me away in the hallway. He let me lead him upstairs, his body rigid with suppressed rage. The moment the door to my childhood bedroom clicked shut, he shoved me away. Stop clinging to me, he hissed, wiping his sleeve as if my touch had contaminated him. What is wrong with you? I told you to sign the papers and leave. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms and smiling sweetly. You're my husband, Richard. Why can't I hang on to your arm? Is it because Valery is watching? He took a deep breath, trying to control his temper. He walked over to the window, staring out at the rain, refusing to look at me. Did you sign the divorce agreement? No, I said, my voice light and airy. He spun around. Why not? Is 20 million not enough? Do you want more? Fine.
25.
Just sign the damn thing. I'm pregnant, remember? I said, dropping the smile. My hand drifted instinctively to my lower belly. I told you, he snarled, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. I had a vasectomy. Stop lying. It's pathetic. Are you trying to trap me? Or did you sleep with the gardener? I looked him dead in the eye. The old Natalie would have crumbled. The old Natalie would have begged for him to believe her. But the old Natalie died in the kitchen this afternoon. Are you sure the doctor didn't scam you? I asked, my tone mocking. Or maybe your swimmers are just stronger than you think. Because let me tell you something, Richard. You are the only man I've been with for these 3 years. Hell, you're the only man I've ever been with. So, unless it's an immaculate conception, that baby is yours. He stared at me, his face a mask of livid disbelief. He looked like he was seeing me for the first time. What happened to you? He whispered. You've changed. Have I? I laughed, a harsh sound. For 3 years, I was the perfect docile wife. Gentle, considerate, always listening to you. I folded your socks. I cooked your porridge. I waited up for you. And you never saw me. You never saw this side of me.
I stepped closer to him, invading his personal space. The gentle me was just a facade, a role I played, hoping for a crumb of affection. The real me? The one I buried to fit into your little box? She's the type who doesn't let things go. If I couldn't make you fall for me, Richard, then I will make sure you bleed. You're insane, he breathed. Maybe, I shrugged. But at least I'm better than someone who doesn't even recognize his own child. He was so angry he couldn't even speak. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom, dried his hair aggressively, and stormed out of the room. I fixed my lipstick in the mirror. Showtime, I whispered to my reflection. Downstairs, dinner was served. It was a lavish spread, lobster, steak, vintage wine. A celebration for the prodigal daughter. I sat right next to Richard, taking the seat that Valery was eyeing. She hesitated, then sat on his other side, looking like a kicked puppy. I went into overdrive. I acted cute, demanding, and utterly oblivious to the atmosphere. Honey, I cooed, pointing at the seafood platter. I want some of that lobster, but it's too far. Can you peel it for me? You know I hate getting my hands dirty. Richard gripped his fork so hard his knuckles turned white. You have hands, Natalie. But you always do it so well, I pouted, turning to my mother. Mom, doesn't Richard take such good care of me? My mother looked uncomfortable. Yes, dear. But maybe let Richard eat. Richard, sensing the awkwardness, stabbed a piece of lobster, peeled it aggressively, and dumped it on my plate. Thanks, babe. I beamed. A moment later, I nudged him again. Honey, my water is empty. Get me some more, please. The pitcher is heavy. I kept bossing him around, forcing him to play the part of the doting husband. Pass the salt. Cut my steak. Wipe this spill. I could see both him and Valery getting more and more upset. Valery was picking at her food, her eyes darting between us. Maybe she was finally realizing that the man who used to follow her around like a puppy was now, at least on paper, someone else's husband. That the seat she left empty had been filled. Richard was barely eating. His stomach was probably churning. Good. Halfway through dinner, Valery suddenly dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. I'm not feeling well, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm just so tired. She pushed her chair back and ran upstairs. Richard, unable to take it anymore, threw his napkin on the table. I need to use the restroom. He practically sprinted in the direction Valery had gone, though the bathroom was the other way. As soon as he was gone, the air in the room shifted. My mother leaned over, her face transforming from concern to furious. Her voice was a sharp whisper that cut deeper than a knife. Natalie! What are you doing? What am I doing? I asked, taking a calm sip of my wine. I'm having dinner with my family. You know exactly what I mean, my mother hissed. Your sister just went through a terrible breakup. She is fragile. Acting like that, so clingy, so demanding with Richard, it's cruel. You are upsetting her. I almost laughed out loud. This family had always revolved around Valery. When she ran away 3 years ago, they sacrificed me to save the company. They forced me into a loveless marriage, never once asking about my happiness. Now that she was back, she was all they cared about again. She abandoned him, Mom, I said quietly. She left him at the altar. I've been his wife for 3 years. Am I supposed to pretend I don't exist just because she decided to come home? You know the arrangement, my father chimed in, his voice gruff. You were a placeholder. A necessary measure. Now that Valery is back, things can go back to how they were supposed to be. Go back? I looked at them, incredulous. I am a person, Dad. Not a piece of furniture you can move to the attic when you buy a new sofa. Don't be dramatic, my mother waved her hand dismissively. Richard never loved you anyway. Why torture each other? Valery and Richard, they have a history. A spark. You should be happy for your sister. Maybe you should just give them some space. A divorce would be best for everyone. There it was. They were all in on it. They didn't think there was anything wrong with my husband being so attentive to my sister. In this world, Valery was the main character, and I was just the background scenery, an obstacle to be removed. No one cared about me. I should have been used to it by now, but it still stung. I lifted my head, hiding the sadness in my eyes behind a mask of cool indifference. I put on a pitiful, confused look. But Mom, Dad. I can't just divorce him, I said, my voice carrying slightly towards the hallway where I heard footsteps returning. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's jaw dropped. My father choked on his wine. That's why I need Richard to take care of me, I continued, raising my voice just a fraction. We're going to have a baby. The heir you always wanted for the alliance. Before I could finish, I heard the sharp, explosive sound of glass breaking. Smash. I looked up. Valery was standing on the stairs, looking down at the dining room. She wasn't holding anything, she must have knocked over a vase on the landing console. Her face was drained of all color, filled with utter shock and horror. Pregnant, she whispered, her voice trembling. At the same time, Richard ran out of the shadows of the hallway. He must have been comforting her. He looked from me to Valery, panic written all over his face. Valery, wait, he started. Valery looked at him, betrayed. You said you didn't touch her. You said it was just a contract. It is. Richard yelled, forgetting his dignity. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with hatred. She's lying. I told you, it's impossible. Is it? I asked, standing up and smoothing my dress over my stomach. Are you calling your child a liar before it's even born? Valery let out a sob and ran back up the stairs. Valery! Richard shouted. He took a step towards the stairs, then stopped, realizing he couldn't chase his sister-in-law while his wife and parents watched. He turned on me, grabbing my wrist. "We are leaving. Now." He didn't wait for goodbyes. He dragged me out of the house, away from the shattered glass and my sister's shattered expression. The car ride home was silent and suffocating. Richard drove like a maniac, the rain lashing against the windshield.
Back at our sterile, cold mansion, he slammed the front door shut and rounded on me. "You humiliated me," he spat. "You humiliated Valery. Are you happy?" I kicked off my heels and walked past him to the stairs. "I just told my parents the good news. Grandparents usually like to know these things." "There is no baby," he roared, his voice echoing in the high ceilings. "I will take you to a clinic tomorrow. We will get a paternity test, and when it proves you're a liar, I will throw you out on the street without a penny." I turned on the stairs, looking down at him. "And if it proves it's yours? What then, Richard? Will you apologize? Will you be a father?" He sneered. "If that thing is mine, it's a mistake. I don't want a child with you. I want a divorce." I shrugged, a strange sense of satisfaction washing over me.
We'll see.
I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, pale, but my eyes were burning with a fire I hadn't felt in years. Recalling Valerie's shock and Richard's rage, I smiled at my reflection. Maybe I did have a knack for playing the villain after all. The next day, I slept in until the sun was streaming through the windows. I woke up and checked the time. It was past 8 a.m. Panic flared in my chest for a split second. Habit is a powerful thing. Normally, I would have been up at 6 a.m. I would have ironed Richard's shirt, ensuring the crease was razor sharp. I would have prepared his specific breakfast. Oatmeal with almond milk, lukewarm, exactly how his stomach liked it, and his artisanal coffee, brewed at precisely 195 degrees. Then I remembered. I wasn't that wife anymore. I rolled over, buried my face in the soft pillow, and stretched like a cat, sleeping and felt incredible. I finally walked out of the bedroom around 8:30, wearing my most comfortable silk robe. I drifted downstairs to see Richard sitting on the sofa in the living room. He was fully dressed for work, but his tie was slightly crooked and his shirt looked wrinkled. He looked furious. He was a creature of habit, and his morning routine was sacred. He was waiting for his coffee. He was waiting for his breakfast. He looked up as I descended the stairs. "Do you know what time it is?" he snapped. "Where is my coffee? Where is my breakfast?" I walked right past him into the kitchen. "Good morning to you, too." I opened the fridge, took out some yogurt and berries for myself, and leaned against the counter to eat. "I'm asking you a question," he said, following me into the kitchen. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. I'm hungry." "I'm hungry too," I said cheerfully, taking a spoonful of yogurt. "That's why I'm eating." "What about me?" he asked, genuinely baffled. I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, I thought since we're getting a divorce, I'm no longer your maid. You have hands, Richard. There's cereal in the pantry. Or maybe you can call Valerie to come cook for you. I hear she's great at making reservations." His face turned a shade of purple. His stomach let out a loud, embarrassing growl. You are unbelievable," he sputtered. "You are doing this on purpose to sabotage my day." "I'll order some takeout," I said, pulling out my phone and ignoring his tantrum. "Thai food sounds good." "You know I can't eat Thai food. The spices will kill me." "Oh, right," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Well, I'm ordering for myself. Good luck with the cereal." Before the delivery driver even arrived, Richard slammed the front door so hard the windows rattled and left. Good thing I didn't order for him. That afternoon, I decided to initiate phase 2 of my severance package. I had access to the supplementary credit card, the black card Richard gave me for household expenses, which I rarely used because I was always trying to be frugal for him.
Not today.
I went to the most expensive spa in the city. I booked the Royal Treatment, a 5-hour session involving massages, facials, and gold leaf wraps. While I was lying on a heated table, smelling of lavender and eucalyptus, My phone buzzed. It was Richard's executive assistant, Sarah. Her voice was frantic. Mrs. Natalie? Is everything okay? Everything is wonderful, Sarah.
Why?
It's Mr. Richard. He's in a terrible mood. He yelled at the interns. And he's asking about his lunch. He says the cafeteria food is slop and doesn't suit his tastes.
He hasn't eaten all day.
Did you forget to pack his bento box?
Oh, right.
I always packed his lunch, too. Balanced, nutritious, bland. Over the years, I had spoiled him with my cooking to the point where he could barely stomach anything else. Don't worry, Sarah, I said calmly, examining my freshly manicured nails.
He's a grown man.
When he's starving, he'll eat. But I'm busy right now.
Goodbye.
I hung up and turned my phone off. I spent the rest of the afternoon shopping. I bought shoes I didn't need, bags that cost more than a car, and jewelry that sparkled like vengeance. Every time I swiped the card, I imagined the notification popping up on Richard's phone in the middle of his meetings.
Ding.
$5,000.
Ding.
$12,000. It was petty. It was childish. And it felt absolutely amazing. That evening, I received a message. It wasn't from Richard, but from Valery. It was a picture. In the photo, Richard was sitting in a dimly lit restaurant. He looked tired, his tie undone. In front of him was a massive, bubbling pot of bright red, spicy Sichuan hot pot. Valery had added a caption, "Dinner with the love of my life." He says he loves spicy food now because I love it. True love is making sacrifices. A second later, she retracted the message, following up with a text. Oops. Sorry, wrong send. Don't tell Richard the first sent that. We're just catching up as friends. I stared at the screen. I wasn't sad. In fact, I almost laughed. Valery always got what she wanted with a flick of her finger. Now she was resorting to these childish tactics to mark her territory. But she was an idiot. Richard had a severe ulcer condition. He hadn't eaten all day. Skipping breakfast, skipping lunch, and then dumping fiery, oily hot pot into an empty, sensitive stomach? That wasn't true love. That was a death sentence. He hated spicy food. He was only eating it to impress her, to prove he was the exciting man she wanted, not the boring husband I knew. Go ahead, Richard, I whispered to the phone. Eat up. Accommodating the princess comes at a cost. I turned off the lights and went to sleep, hugging my pillow, enjoying the peace.
Sure enough, when I woke up the next morning, my phone had blown up with dozens of missed calls and frantic messages from Sarah. The last one was short and to the point. Natalie, please pick up. Richard has been hospitalized. Internal bleeding. It's bad. I stared at the text message about Richard's hospitalization. A pang of worry tried to surface. Old habits die hard, but I squashed it down. He brought this on himself. He chose the hot pot. He chose Valery. I slowly got up, showered, and went to the kitchen. I made myself a pot of soothing rice porridge with chicken and ginger. It was Richard's favorite comfort food, the only thing he could eat when his stomach flared up. I ate a bowl, savoring the warmth. Then, looking at the pot, I shrugged. I packed the leftovers into a thermos. Not because I cared, but because it was part of the plan. The perfect wife act had to have a finale. I drove to the private hospital. He was in the VIP wing, of course. I had barely reached the door to room 304 when I saw him. He was sitting up in bed, looking gray and haggard. And 4 drip was attached to his arm. He was looking toward the door expectantly, his eyes lighting up for a fraction of a second. But when he saw it was me, his face soured, and he quickly looked away, disappointment etched in his features. He was expecting Valery. Of course. She poisons him with hot pot and then doesn't even show up to hold his hand? Classic Valery. Natalie is here, Sarah, his assistant, said, looking relieved. She quickly took the thermos from my hands. Oh, thank God. Mr. Richard has been refusing the hospital food. He's been asking for your porridge. Really? I said, stepping into the room. I thought he preferred spicy food now. Richard glared at me, wincing as pain shot through his abdomen. Shut up. This porridge smells so good, Sarah remarked, opening the container and pouring a bowl. The scent of ginger and chicken filled the sterile room. You're so lucky, Mr. Richard. Natalie takes such good care of you. I smiled faintly, a cold, razor-sharp smile. Actually, Sarah, those are just the leftovers from my breakfast. Richard froze, the spoon halfway to his mouth. I didn't want to waste them, I continued breezily, checking my nails. So I brought them for you. Better than the trash can, right? Sarah froze. Richard's face turned from pale to a livid shade of green. He slammed the spoon down. Get out! Take your garbage and get out! Suit yourself, I said. Don't forget to pay the credit card bill. The spa was expensive yesterday. I turned and walked out, feeling lighter than air. Knowing he was unhappy, knowing he was hungry and miserable, I felt at ease. Just as I stepped into the hallway, I almost collided with someone leaning against the wall by the door. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He had messy dark hair and eyes that crinkled with amusement. He was holding a bouquet of lilies, but he wasn't looking at the door, he was looking at me. I knew him. It was Julian. Julian was Richard's biggest business rival. He was the CEO of a competing tech firm, a man known for his ruthless tactics and his charm. Richard hated him with a passion. He called him a vulture. Julian pushed off the wall, a lazy smile on his face. Eavesdropping? I asked defensively. How is it eavesdropping when you were loud enough for the whole floor to hear? He chuckled. His voice was deep, smooth like velvet. Better than the trash can. Ouch. That was brutal, Mrs. Natalie. It's Ms. Natalie, soon, I corrected him. And what are you doing here? Here to gloat? Maybe a little, he admitted, glancing at the lilies. I brought flowers for my favorite enemy. Heard he lost a battle with a chili pepper. Pathetic. He looked back at me, his gaze shifting from amused to something softer. He studied my face, my eyes, my defiance. You know, making that man so mad, it looks good on you. Much better than the dutiful shadow look you used to wear at galas. I stared at him blankly. Stop looking at me like you know me. It's weird. Maybe I know you better than you think, he murmured, almost to himself. Get lost, I snapped. I was done with men for the day. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes filled with a strange, inexplicable tenderness. There's the fire. That's the Natalie I remember. Remember? I frowned. We've barely spoken 2 words to each other in 3 years. Memory is a funny thing, he said cryptically. I rolled my eyes. I thought he was just being slick, trying to flirt with his enemy's wife for sport. I stepped right on his expensive leather shoe, grinding my heel in for good measure. Ow, he yelped, hopping on one foot. Oops, I said deadpan. Clumsy me. I walked away, leaving him hopping in the hallway, clutching his lilies. I felt a strange thrill. For the first time in years, a man looked at me with interest, not obligation. Even if that man was the enemy. I was definitely going to divorce Richard. But I was dragging it out, not just to annoy him and Valerie, but because of the child. I hesitated for a few days. The thought of raising a child alone felt heavy and overwhelming. Richard's words about the vasectomy haunted me. What if he was right? No, that was impossible. But the gaslighting was strong. Finally, I decided I couldn't make a decision based on fear. I made an appointment at a private obstetrics clinic and went in for a series of comprehensive tests. The doctor, a kind-faced woman with graying hair named Dr. Evans, looked over my ultrasound and blood work with a deep frown. The silence in the room stretched for an eternity. "Natalie," she said gently, taking off her glasses. "We need to talk about your options." My heart hammered in my chest. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "The baby is fine," she said. "But your uterus, the lining is incredibly thin. You have a condition called uterine scarring. It's likely congenital." She took a breath. "Given your physical condition, this pregnancy is a miracle. If you choose to terminate this pregnancy, the procedure would likely cause permanent damage. You would almost certainly never be able to conceive again. This is your only chance to be a mother." I walked out of her office in a daze. The hallway of the clinic seemed to stretch and warp. My only chance.
I was already hesitant, but now, with the doctor's stark warning, the decision was made for me. This was my child, my blood. Whether Richard wanted it or not, whether he believed it was his or not, I was going to keep this baby. I was not going to give my baby up. I would raise this child on my own. I would protect it from Richard's coldness and Valerie's jealousy. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the clinic, stepping out into the bright afternoon sun. The light blinded me for a moment. As soon as my eyes adjusted, I saw him again. Julian. He was leaning against the brick wall near the entrance, looking at his phone. He looked up as I exited, then glanced at the obstetrician's sign on the door. He straightened up, putting his phone away. A slow, unreadable expression spread across his face. "Natalie," he said. His voice wasn't mocking this time. "You're here. Are you following me?" I asked, clutching my purse defensively. "First the hospital, now here?" "Coincidence," he said, though he looked guilty. "My aunt goes here. But you?" He looked at my stomach, then back at my face. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. "Why does it matter to you?" I snapped, stepping around him. "Go tell Richard. Go have a laugh about it." "I wouldn't do that," he said, sounding offended. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have driven you." "Tell you?" I laughed incredulously. "We aren't friends, Julian. You are my husband's rival. And I am, well, I'm practically his ex-wife. Leave me alone." I did the only thing that felt right to escape the awkwardness. I tried to storm past him. I wanted to make a dramatic exit. But maybe my luck had run out. Or maybe I was just too distracted by the turmoil in my head. As I walked down the front concrete steps of the clinic, I completely missed the last step.
My heel caught on the edge.
I pitched forward. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the concrete pavement rushing up to meet me. My hands flew instinctively to my belly, wrapping around it to shield the tiny life inside. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, bracing for the pain, bracing for the loss. My baby.
But the impact never came.
Vaguely, I felt a rush of air, a blur of motion. A strong pair of arms slammed around me, catching me midair, inches from the ground. The grip was iron-tight, desperate. I was yanked back against a hard chest. I could hear a heart pounding, fast, erratic, terrified. "Doctor.
Doctor.
Come quickly." The voice roared in my ear, deafening and raw with panic. It was Julian. I opened my eyes. I was dangling in his arms, my feet dangling off the ground. He was holding me like I was the most precious, fragile thing in the world. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed completely disproportionate to a simple stumble. He looked like he had just watched me die. I'm okay," I stammered, shocked by his reaction. "Julian, I'm okay. I just tripped."
He didn't seem to hear me.
He was scanning me frantically. "Are you hurt? Does your stomach hurt? Did you hit anything?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to wiggle free. He slowly set me down, but his hands hovered around me, ready to catch me again. He took a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. His composure was completely shattered. "You have to be careful," he breathed, his voice trembling. You have to watch where you're going. You can't just fall like that." I stared at him. Why did he care? Why did he sound so genuinely terrified? He was Richard's enemy. I was nothing to him. Just a woman he teased in hallways. Why do you care so much? I whispered. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw something ancient and deep in his eyes, a sorrow and a relief that I couldn't understand. Because, he said softly, I can't watch you get hurt. Not again. Again? I asked, confused. Before he could answer, a shadow fell over us. Get your hands off my wife. I looked up. Richard was standing on the sidewalk, his face a mask of ugly, possessive rage.
He had followed me.
And he did not look happy to see Julian holding me. Richard stood there on the sidewalk, his chest heaving, his eyes darting between Julian's hands on my waist and my face. The air was thick with tension, vibrating with the hum of rush-hour traffic and the silent scream of a marriage in its death throes. Get your hands off my wife, Richard repeated, his voice low and dangerous, stepping closer. He looked like he wanted to crush Julian with just his gaze. Julian didn't flinch. In fact, he laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a dry, mocking sound. He slowly, deliberately removed his hands from me, but he didn't step back. He stayed right in Richard's personal space, towering over him just slightly. Oh, so Natalie has a husband? Julian drawled, tilting his head. I thought she came for a prenatal checkup alone because her hubby was dead. Or maybe just dead inside. Get lost, Richard said through gritted teeth, his fists clenching at his sides. Is that all you can say? Are you a broken record? Actually, Julian said, checking his watch with infuriating calmness, I was just making sure she didn't crack her head open on the concrete. You know, something a husband usually does. But I guess you were too busy, what was it? Eating hot pot with your sister-in-law. Richard's face turned a violent shade of red. You've been stalking me. Hardly. Your life is just so loud, Richard. It's hard not to hear the wreckage. Julian turned to me, his expression softening instantly. Are you sure you're okay to walk? I'm fine, I whispered, though my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird.
Good.
Julian turned back to Richard, his eyes cold as ice. Take care of her. Or someone else will. With that, Julian lazily strolled away, whistling a tune, leaving Richard trembling with impotent rage. Even though Julian was annoying, I had to admit, he was kind of cute when he was angering Richard. Richard spun on me, his face twisted. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Letting him touch you? Letting him humiliate me. I touched my cheek and realized I was smiling. Not a happy smile, but a bitter, triumphant one. Julian wants everything of yours, Richard, I said, echoing Richard's deepest insecurity. Maybe he's only being nice to me because I'm your wife. Or maybe he just sees what you threw away. Don't flatter yourself, Richard sneered, grabbing my arm to drag me toward his car. He's playing a game. And you are the pawn.
At that moment, a brilliant, wicked idea popped into my head. The perfect way to truly piss off Richard. If he thought I was a pawn, I'd show him I was the queen. I pulled my arm free and stopped in the middle of the parking lot. I put on a troubled expression, looking down at my hands, my voice trembling with fake emotion. What should I do? I whispered. What? Richard barked, unlocking the car door. I think I've fallen for Julian. Richard froze. He slowly turned around, his eyes wide. What did you say? I looked up at him, my eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. He's been there for me, Richard. When I was sick. When I was lonely. And just now, did you see how he looked at me? I think I love him. I took a deep breath, delivering the final blow. Richard, I'll sign the divorce papers as soon as we get back. I want to be free. I want to explore this with Julian. Sure enough, my words made his face turn ashen. It was one thing for him to discard me. It was entirely another for me to leave him for his sworn enemy. His ego couldn't take it. Back home, the atmosphere was suffocating. I went straight to the kitchen table where he had left the envelope 2 days ago. It was gone. I searched the counters. I searched the drawers. Nothing. Richard? I called out, walking into the living room. Where are the divorce papers? I'm ready to sign. I want to go call Julian. Richard was pouring himself a drink, his hand shaking slightly. He downed the scotch in one gulp. I don't know, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. You don't know? I raised an eyebrow. You were waving them in my face on Tuesday. You said I had 24 hours. I misplaced them, he lied. The cleaners must have moved them. I knew him well. The man who had been so desperate for me to sign them, offering me $20 million to leave, was now hiding them. Why? Because he couldn't stand the thought of Julian winning. He couldn't stand the thought of me being happy with the one man he hated most. For the sake of his ego, he chose not to divorce me yet. He would rather stay in a miserable marriage than let his rival have his used toy. Well, find them, I said, feigning disappointment. I really want to start my new life. But deep down, I didn't mind. I knew he wouldn't hold out for long. Valery wouldn't let him. And honestly, watching him squirm, watching him trapped between his jealousy and his mistress, was the most entertainment I'd had in years. The following days, I carried on with my life. I ate well, I slept well, and I started planning for my post-divorce life. I stopped hiding in the house. I went for walks. I visited the botanical gardens. I imagined myself in a small, quiet town, opening a little nursery, living a simple life with my baby. The thought filled me with a peace I hadn't felt in 7 years. Then, I got the call. It wasn't Richard. It was my mother. Natalie, she said, her voice sharp. Come home. Now. We need to have a family meeting. I drove to my parents' estate with a sense of foreboding. The rain had cleared, but the sky was a heavy, bruised purple. When I walked into the living room, it felt like walking into a tribunal. My mom, my dad, and Valery were all sitting there. Richard was standing by the fireplace, looking like a man facing a firing squad. They all looked very serious. As soon as she saw me, my mom rushed over and grabbed my hand, her face a mask of exaggerated sorrow. Natalie, she began, guiding me to a solitary chair in the center of the room. We need to talk. We know you haven't been happy these past few years with Richard. He treats you poorly. Like a maid. I almost wanted to laugh. So, she knew all along? I used to think she just didn't notice. I remembered when Valery got a small bump on her arm, they rushed her to the hospital. But I once had a fever that lasted all night, and no one even checked on me. What was worse wasn't that she didn't know. It was that she knew and didn't care. We were both her daughters, but Valery was her precious treasure, and I was just the spare part. Natalie, she continued, her voice filled with fake sympathy. Maybe you should get a divorce. For your own good. If she was suggesting a divorce, it definitely wasn't for my sake. She must have other motives. I glanced at Valery. She was wearing a white dress, looking angelic and fragile, clutching a handkerchief. Yeah, Natalie, Valery chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. Richard never liked you anyway. Why torture each other? It's painful to watch. I looked straight at her. He likes you though, doesn't he? So, you mean we get divorced, and you marry him? Is that the plan? Valery didn't respond, but her silence was a clear admission. She dabbed at her dry eyes. I looked at my mom and dad. They clearly had the same idea. They wanted to restore the original order. The perfect couple, Richard and Valery. I felt no surprise, no disappointment. Just a cold, hard finality. The last thread connecting me to this toxic family snapped. I rubbed my belly, staring Richard down. If we get divorced, what happens to my child? Your grandchild, Mom? Natalie, stop pretending. Valerie snapped, dropping the fragile act. Her patience was gone. The child isn't Richard's. He told us everything. He had a vasectomy. He didn't call you out on it publicly to save your face, so don't push your luck. Ah. So that was the narrative. Richard was the noble victim, and I was the cheating wife. Is that so? I looked at Richard. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. He was letting them crucify me to save his own skin. Fine, I said, standing up. You want a divorce? You want me gone so Valerie can have her turn? We just want what's best for the family, my father grunted. I took a deep breath. $5 million. The room went silent. What? Valerie asked, blinking. Give me $5 million in cash, transferred to my account today, and I will sign the papers immediately. No alimony. No court battles. I disappear. $5 million? My mother gasped. Natalie, don't be greedy. The prenuptial. The prenuptial is void if I prove Richard committed adultery, I lied smoothly. And I have plenty of proof. The umbrella in the rain? The hot pot dinner? The nights he spent working late?
I didn't actually have concrete proof of an affair yet, but they didn't know that. And they were desperate. But Richard offered $20 million. Valerie argued. That offer expired, Richard muttered, finally speaking up. And I don't have the liquidity right now. The merger is draining our cash reserves. Valerie gritted her teeth. My parents had spoiled her for her entire life. Our family wasn't hurting for money, and I knew she had access to her own trust fund. Money I was never privy to. $5 million was nothing to her. But to me, a single mother about to start a new life, it was everything. It was security.
It was a college fund for my child.
It was the capital to start my own business. And the thought of Richard finding out he was sold for $5 million, that would be a delicious bonus. Fine, Valerie spat, pulling out her checkbook. I'll pay it. I'll buy him from you. Are you happy? You're selling your husband like cattle. I'm not selling him, I said coolly. I'm charging a disposal fee for the trash. Valerie wrote the check with shaking hands.
She threw it at me.
It fluttered to the floor. I didn't mind. I bent down and picked it up. Dignity doesn't pay the bills. $5 million does. Call the lawyer, Valerie ordered Richard. She's signing. An hour later, the new papers were in front of me. I signed my name swiftly, my handwriting clear and firm. Natalie Vance. No longer Natalie Sterling. I pushed the papers across the table to Richard. He looked at them, then at me. There was a strange flicker in his eyes. Regret? Relief? It didn't matter. Richard, remember this, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I'm the one who doesn't want you anymore.
You didn't leave me.
I escaped you. I turned to my parents and Valerie.
Goodbye. Don't look for me.
Don't call me. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an orphan. I walked out of that house without looking back. The air outside tasted different. It tasted like rain and freedom. I didn't waste a second. I deposited the check, packed up my life into 10 boxes, and left the city where I had lived for over 30 years. I wanted to go somewhere where the air wasn't thick with exhaust and lies. I moved to a small coastal town called Harborview, thousands of miles away. It was sleepy, charming, and smelled of salt and pine. I bought a small, rundown cottage near the cliffs with a garden that had been neglected for years. It was perfect. My plan was simple: fix up the house, have my baby, and open a small plant nursery. I wanted to get my hands dirty again, to nurture things that would actually grow, unlike my marriage. The first week was a blur of unpacking and painting. I felt lonely, yes. Sometimes I would wake up reaching for Richard, only to realize the other side of the bed was empty. But then I would remember the look on his face when he accused me of cheating, and the loneliness would turn into resolve. One afternoon, I was struggling to move a heavy terracotta pot onto my front porch. It was humid, and my back was aching. "Need a hand, neighbor?" The voice came from the street. I froze. I knew that voice. It was deep, velvety, and undeniably familiar. I turned around slowly. Leaning against the white picket fence of the large Victorian house directly across the street was Julian. He was wearing a casual linen shirt and shorts, a far cry from the sharp suits I always saw him in. He was wearing sunglasses, looking infuriatingly relaxed. "You have got to be kidding me," I groaned, wiping sweat from my forehead. He opened a gate and walked up the path, effortless and confident. "What a coincidence, Natalie," he said, his smile charming enough to disarm a bomb. "Coincidence?" I scoffed. "You followed me, you stalker." He laughed. "That's what I wanted to ask you. I bought that house across the street 6 months ago as a vacation rental. I just came down to check on renovations. Imagine my surprise when I saw the fiercest woman in New York wrestling with a flower pot across the street." "I don't believe you," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "Believe what you want," he said, effortlessly lifting the heavy pot I had been struggling with. "Where do you want this?" "By the door," I muttered, defeated. He placed it down gently. "So, you really did it? You left him?" "I divorced him," I corrected. "And I took a nice severance package." "Good for you," he said, looking at me with genuine admiration. "He didn't deserve you." "And what are you doing here, Julian? Really?" He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were dark and serious. "I needed a break. The city, it gets loud. And maybe, just maybe, I was hoping to run into someone interesting." "I'm not interesting," I said, turning to go inside. "I'm a pregnant divorcee trying to plant hydrangeas." "That," he grinned, "is the most interesting thing I've heard all year." I slammed the door in his face, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. The house was move-in ready, but my life was still a mess. I sat on my new sofa and my phone rang. I picked it up, saw it was Richard's number, and felt a surge of anger. I hung up immediately. Wrong number. I blocked him. Soon after, another unfamiliar number called. "Natalie? I'm a friend of Richard's. He got drunk. He's at a bar downtown.
He's asking for you."
Can you come pick him up?" I remembered the old days. Before, when Richard got drunk at social events, no matter how far, no matter how late, I would go and pick him up. I would drive him home, undress him, give him water and aspirin. I was his designated driver, his nurse, his mother.
But now?
"We're divorced," I said into the phone. "Call his secretary. Or better yet, call Valerie. She bought him. She can drive him." I hung up and blocked that number, too. My blacklist now had 2 people on it, and it was just the beginning. My peace was hard-won, and I wasn't going to let Richard ruin it from across the country. But Julian was a different problem. He was persistent. The next morning, I opened my front door to find a basket of fresh muffins and a note. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Don't worry, they aren't spicy.
Jay."
I looked across the street. He was on his porch, drinking coffee, and raised his mug in a toast. I sighed. It was going to be a long summer.
Months passed. My belly swelled, and so did my confidence. I used a chunk of the $5 million to buy an old storefront on Main Street. I renovated it myself, turning it into Natalie's Eden, a boutique flower shop and nursery. The work was peaceful. The smell of fresh blooms, lilies, roses, eucalyptus, filled my days. I hired a local teenager to help with the heavy lifting, but I did the arrangements myself. My hands were always dirty, my hair was always messy, and I had never been happier. Meanwhile, Richard's life was apparently imploding. Though I had blocked him, news travels. Sarah, his assistant, who secretly liked me more than him, would occasionally email me updates under the guise of forwarding mail. Richard's business was suffering. Without me managing his diet, his ulcers had returned with a vengeance, making him irritable and prone to outbursts in meetings. Without me smoothing over his social faux pas, he was alienating partners. And Valery? She was a disaster. She spent money faster than he could make it. She threw tantrums when he worked late. She refused to cook or clean, so they lived in a mess of takeout boxes and dry cleaning bags. He had started calling me from random numbers. Natalie, he would slur, clearly drunk. Where are you? The house is so quiet. Valery, she doesn't know how to iron my shirts. She burned my favorite silk tie. Goodbye, Richard, I would say, and hang up. Natalie, I miss you. I made a mistake. Please, just talk to me. Block. Natalie, are you really having a baby? Is it mine? Block. It was pathetic. He was in his regret era, realizing too late that he had traded a diamond for a rhinestone. Back in Harborview, Julian had become a fixture in my life. He came by the flower shop every single day. Welcome, I said one morning, looking up from a bouquet of lilies. My eyes rolled instinctively. It was Julian, dressed in a flawless linen suit, looking like he had just stepped out of a GQ magazine. I'll take the usual, he said, leaning against the counter. The usual was ridiculous. He would buy a massive bouquet of 99 red roses. I would tell him the price, an exorbitant amount because I was trying to discourage him. He would pay without blinking. And then, he would hand the massive bouquet right back to me. For the most beautiful woman in the room, he would say. I don't want them, Julian, I would sigh. I own a flower shop. I have plenty of flowers. Then keep them here, he smiled, taking the vase and arranging them on my counter himself. They brighten up the place. He was relentless. But he wasn't pushy in a bad way. He was helpful. When the sink in the back broke, he fixed it before I could call a plumber. When I had a craving for pickles at midnight, I found a jar on my doorstep the next morning. He never asked for anything in return. He just existed in my orbit, steady and warm. At first, I refused his advances. I was damaged goods. I was pregnant with another man's child. I was done with love. Then, I just got numb to it. He could do whatever he wanted. But slowly, the numbness started to melt. One afternoon, I was out back, helping the delivery driver unload a fresh shipment of ceramic pots. Natalie, watch out, the driver shouted. I looked up. A car, a tourist speeding down the quiet street, looking at their phone, swerved out of control. It was hopping the curb, coming straight at me. In that instant, my mind went completely blank. I was frozen, clutching a pot of hydrangeas. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the terrified face of the teenage driver. I saw the chrome bumper. I couldn't move. My pregnant body was too heavy, too slow. Just as the car was about to hit me, a blur of white linen slammed into me. Someone shoved me hard to the side. I fell to the grass, scraping my hands, rolling to protect my stomach. The world was a confusing blur of motion, screeching tires, and a sickening thud. It took me a moment to realize what had happened. I sat up, gasping for air. My baby, my baby. I touched my stomach. It was fine. I was fine. Then I looked at the street. Julian was lying on the pavement a few feet away. He was always such a neat freak. But now, his sunglasses were shattered. His hair was a mess. And his leg was bent at an unnatural angle. He wasn't moving. Julian! I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. I crawled over to him, ignoring the scrapes on my knees. Julian, get up! Please, get up! He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, his face pale and beaded with sweat. He tried to smirk, but it came out as a grimace. I'm not as clumsy as you, he rasped. I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. A little car can't hurt me. You idiot! I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. Why did you do that? He tried to sit up, but his face twisted in pain and he collapsed back. Okay, he gasped. I think my leg is broken. Maybe the car won this round. I quickly called an ambulance, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the phone twice. While we waited, I held his hand. He squeezed it back, surprisingly strong. Hey, he whispered, reaching up to wipe a tear from my cheek. Your face looks terrible. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I sobbed. Stop worrying about me. Look at your leg. It's just a scratch, he lied. Hey, don't cry. I'm really okay. Look, I can even jump. He actually tried to lift his leg. If you move, I'll cry even harder. I shouted, holding him down. Stay still. He immediately stopped moving, looking at me with those intense, dark eyes. Okay. I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere, Natalie. In that moment of chaos and terror, listening to the siren approaching in the distance, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just grateful. I was in love with him. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. I refused to let go of Julian's hand, even when the paramedics tried to strap him down. He kept cracking jokes, trying to make me smile, even though his face was gray with pain. At least I get to ride in a vehicle with you without you blocking my number, he wheezed. Shut up, Julian, I sniffled, wiping my eyes. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed his leg was broken, a clean fracture of the tibia. It wasn't life-threatening, but it required surgery and a long recovery.
I stayed with him through the surgery, pacing the waiting room floor until I wore a path in the linoleum. When he finally woke up in recovery, groggy from anesthesia, the first thing he said was, "Did you save the flowers?" I laughed, a wet, choke sound. You are impossible. I hired a private nurse for him, but I found myself at the hospital every single day. I brought him homemade food, rich soups, hearty stews, everything I used to cook for Richard, but with actual flavor this time. The same guy who wanted to jump around earlier now lay in bed like a sick, fragile beauty queen. He milked it for all it was worth. Natalie, I want some water, he'd whine, pointing to the cup 2 inches from his hand. It's right there, I'd say, rolling my eyes. My arm hurts from the 4. Feed me. He'd open his mouth like a baby bird. Natalie, my shoulders are sore. Massage them? I tried to ignore him, but he'd look at me with big, sad puppy eyes, his handsome face wrinkled in faux pain. My leg hurts so much, he'd say pitifully. And for whom did I get hurt? A damsel in distress who won't even rub my shoulders. I'd sigh, defeated, and sit by his bed, massaging his shoulders. His muscles were tense, and as my hands worked out the knots, I felt a strange intimacy growing between us. It was during one of these moments, about a week later, that I was peeling an apple for him. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the room. Suddenly, the door to his VIP room was knocked open hard. I looked up, knife in hand. It was Richard. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His suit was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved in days. He looked much more weathered and tired than the last time I saw him. He stood in the doorway, breathing hard, as if he had run all the way here. Natalie, he breathed, ignoring the man in the bed. I found you. He walked straight toward me. He didn't say another word. He just grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the door. We're going home. Hey, Julian shouted from the bed, struggling to sit up. Take your filthy hands off my girlfriend. Richard froze. He looked at Julian, then at me. Girlfriend? Let go or I'll fight you. Julian growled, trying to swing his legs off the bed. Nurse. Security. Stay in bed. I warned Julian, pushing him back down gently. If you get up, no dinner for you. You'll re-break your leg. He obediently laid back down, pouting, but his eyes were murderous as they fixed on Richard. "I'll talk to him for a bit," I told Julian calmly. "I'll be right back." Richard's face darkened even more. He dragged me out into the hallway, his grip painfully tight. "What are you doing here?" I asked, yanking my arm free and rubbing the red spot he left. "Did you come to give me an invitation to your wedding with Valery? Because I'm not interested." "Natalie, stop it," Richard said, his voice rough and desperate. "I didn't marry Valery. She's gone." "Gone?" I raised an eyebrow. "She left me," he admitted, the shame burning in his eyes. "She took the money, your $5 million, and whatever was left in my accounts, and went back to Europe. She said I was boring and broke." I felt zero pity. "Sounds like karma, Richard. Then what do you want?" I asked. He stared at me with those haunted eyes. "Natalie, let's get back together." The words rushed out of him like a dam breaking. "I've been thinking about you all this time. I dream about you. I realize now. I love you. Losing you made me see my feelings clearly. The house is empty. My life is empty. Valery was a mistake. A fantasy. You are real." His voice turned hurtful, pleading. "Why didn't you take my calls? Even when Sarah called, you didn't pick up. I was in the hospital too, Natalie. No one came. No one brought me porridge." Someone as proud as Richard saying such things must have taken a lot of courage. He was practically begging. But I wasn't touched. In fact, I found it laughable. "I'm sorry, Richard," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I don't love you anymore.
I have someone I like now."
Please don't bother us." He got anxious, grabbing my shoulders. "Don't trust Julian. He doesn't love you. He's just competing with me. He wants to steal my wife just like he steals my market share." A bitter sneer crossed my face. "When I was sick and called you from our own bed, you said you had to work overtime," I said, poking him in the chest. "When I told you I was pregnant, you called me a liar." I pointed to the door of room 304. "A few days ago, when a car almost hit me, Julian shielded me with his own body. He didn't think twice. He broke his leg for me." I leaned in close to Richard's face. "Do you really think you're in any position to say Julian doesn't love me?" He was stunned, speechless. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Richard, we're divorced," I said with finality. "There's no going back. Go find your Valery. Or stay alone. I don't care." I turned to enter the room. "Natalie," he sobbed behind me. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "You're making a mistake," he yelled. "That child needs a father." "It has one," I said softly. "And it isn't you." I walked into the room and closed the door, shutting out my past forever. Back in the room, the atmosphere was tense. Julian was sitting up, staring at the door like he was trying to burn a hole through it with his X-ray vision. "Is he gone?" he demanded. "He's gone," I said, sitting back down in the chair and picking up the apple and knife. My hands were shaking slightly. "Did he hurt you?" Julian asked, his eyes scanning me. "If he touched you, I swear I will hop out there on one leg and beat him with my crutch." "I'm fine, Julian," I smiled, slicing a piece of apple. I told him to get lost. For good. Julian relaxed, sinking back into the pillows.
"Good.
Because if you went back to him, I'd have to kidnap you." Natalie, he started then stopped.
He groaned.
"My leg hurts. Come kiss it. A kiss will make it better." "You're a child." I laughed. I grabbed his ear and twisted lightly.
"Ouch."
I met my cheek, not my lips. "And not in front of the nurse," he yelped. A week later, Julian was discharged. He insisted on recovering at his new house across the street from mine, claiming his city apartment had too many stairs. It had an elevator. I hired a nurse to take care of him during the day, but I often visited in the evenings.
According to the doctor, after 3 months, he should have been able to walk freely. But his recovery was oddly slow. He'd whine and complain if his foot even touched the ground. "Natalie, I can't walk to the kitchen," he'd call out. "Can you bring me some water?" "Natalie, my leg is stiff. Can you help me stretch?" Something was off. Julian had a lean, muscular build. I had accidentally seen his 8-pack abs once when the nurse was changing his gown. How could someone in such good shape, a black belt in Taekwondo, not recover in 3 months? One afternoon, I went over to bring him some of my homemade lasagna. He was lying on the sofa, his leg propped up on 3 pillows, watching TV. "Natalie," he beamed. "My leg is so sore today. It feels like thunder is coming. Come and massage it?" I narrowed my eyes. I set the lasagna down on the table. "Really?" I asked. "Still sore?" "Agony," he nodded solemnly. I decided to test a theory. I suddenly clutched my stomach, letting out a small gasp. "Oh!" I dropped to my knees, groaning. "My stomach! Natalie!" Julian jumped up from the sofa in a panic. He didn't limp. He didn't use his crutches. He sprang up like a panther, landing perfectly on both feet, and rushed over to me. "Natalie, what's wrong? Is it the baby? I'll take you to the hospital." He scooped me up in his arms effortlessly, standing strong on his broken leg. I stopped groaning. I looked at him. I looked at his legs. He froze. He looked down at his legs. Then he looked at me. He instantly realized he was busted. He slowly set me down. A sheepish, guilty grin spread across his face. He scratched the back of his neck. "Oh man," he laughed nervously. "How did my leg suddenly get better? Is this the power of love?" I stared at him, trying to be angry, but laughter bubbled up in my chest. "You liar! You've been faking it for weeks." "Only for the last 2 weeks," he protested. I liked having you take care of me. I liked you coming over." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was afraid if I got better, you wouldn't have a reason to visit anymore." My heart melted. This powerful, wealthy CEO had pretended to be a cripple just to get some lasagna and attention from me. I reached out and pinched his ear hard. "You idiot. I would have visited anyway." "Really?" he asked, hope lighting up his eyes. "Really," I smiled. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "Then, can I get that kiss now? The one for the cheek?" I didn't kiss his cheek. I kissed him on the lips. It was soft, sweet, and tasted like promise. The moment I kicked Richard out of my life, I felt a weight lift that I didn't know I was carrying. But the moment I kissed Julian, I realized I hadn't just lost a burden, I had found a home. I chose the man who broke his leg for me, not the one who broke my heart. If you are still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. Let me know you are with me. Your support means the world to me. Comment 1 so I can see you, and now, listen to the rest of my story. Julian stayed with me through everything. He wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a partner. He attended every prenatal yoga class with me, usually the only man in the room, trying to do the poses in his expensive suits until I made him buy sweatpants. He read every baby book I bought, highlighting the important parts about sleep training and diaper rash. When my due date approached, he was more nervous than I was. He packed a go bag that contained everything from organic snacks to a portable fan and, for some reason, a flare gun. "Why the flare gun, Julian?" I asked, holding it up. "In case we get stuck in a blizzard on the way to the hospital," he suggested weakly. "It's July," I reminded him. On the day my son was born, Julian was in the delivery room. Richard wasn't there. Richard didn't even know. Julian held my hand while I screamed. He wiped the sweat from my forehead. He let me crush his fingers until they turned purple. And when the baby finally came out, screaming and red-faced, Julian was the first one to hold him. "He's beautiful," Julian whispered, tears streaming down his face. Natalie, look. He's perfect. He was clumsy but so careful around the tiny baby. Come on, sweetie, he'd whisper to the little bundle in the middle of the night when I was too exhausted to move. Let's let mommy sleep. Say, Daddy's got you. I watched them from the doorway, my heart swelling so much I thought it might burst. We named him Leo. Leo was a happy baby. He had my eyes, but as he grew, his nose and chin were undeniably Richard's. He was a mini version of my ex-husband. I worried, at first, that this would bother Julian. That looking at Leo would remind him of the man he hated. But Julian never flinched. He looks like you, Julian would say, tickling Leo's tummy. He has your smile. He has Richard's nose, I pointed out one day, testing him. Julian shrugged. Better looking on Leo than on Richard. Besides, genetics is just biology. Parenting is love. He's my boy. Sterling. Julian grew alongside me. A few days later, he was already an expert at changing diapers. He could do it in under 30 seconds with one hand tied behind his back, a challenge I actually gave him. When Leo turned 1, the first word he learned was mama. The second was dada. And he was looking straight at Julian when he said it. Julian was so happy he was practically floating the whole day. He bought everyone in the flower shop lunch. He called his board of directors to tell them. It was the first time I saw someone so enthusiastic about being a dad to someone else's kid. When Leo turned 2, I officially moved into Julian's big house across the street, and we turned my cottage into a guest house. When Leo turned 3, Julian proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture with fireworks. We were in the garden, planting tulips. Leo was covered in mud, digging for worms. Julian got down on one knee, right there in the dirt. Natalie, he said, holding out a ring that looked like a flower made of diamonds. You and Leo, you are my garden. Let me grow old with you. I said yes before he even finished the sentence.
For years had passed since the divorce. While my life bloomed like the flowers in my shop, Richard's life had withered. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, and honestly, it was satisfying to hear. Richard's company had been acquired, hostilely, by a larger conglomerate. And the CEO of the acquiring company, Julian's firm. Julian hadn't done it for revenge. He did it because Richard's company was failing, and it was a good business move. But the irony was delicious. Richard lost his CEO title. He was demoted to a consultant role, forced to watch as Julian stripped the company of its old, inefficient policies. And his personal life was even worse. Valery, true to her nature, didn't stick around when the money got tight. She had blown through the $5 million in less than 2 years on trips to Monaco and designer handbags. When Richard couldn't fund her lifestyle anymore, she cheated on him. Not with a painter this time, but with Richard's own former CFO. She left Richard, cleaned out their joint account, and moved to Dubai. Richard lost the mansion. He had to sell it to pay off debts. He was now living in a rented apartment in a mediocre part of the city. My parents, who had invested heavily in Richard's company on Valery's advice, lost a fortune too. They were forced to downsize. I heard my mother tried to call me once, asking for a loan. But I had changed my number years ago. One day, Julian came home with a strange look on his face. "What is it?" I asked, feeding Leo his dinner. "Richard came to the office today," Julian said, loosening his tie. "He was asking for an advance on his consulting fee. He looked rough, Natalie. He asked about you." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were happy," Julian smiled, "and that you were busy planning our wedding." "Good," I said, wiping tomato sauce off Leo's chin. "He also asked about the baby," Julian added quietly. "He asked if you ever had it." My hand froze. "What did you say?" "I told him it was none of his business," Julian said firmly. "But Natalie, he knows we're getting married next week. The announcement was in the paper. He might try to come." "Let him come," I said, surprising myself. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Let him see what he lost. The wedding was held in the garden of our home in Harborview. It was very low-key, just close friends and Julian's family. The sun was shining, the hydrangeas were in full bloom, and the air smelled of the sea. Leo was our ring bearer. He was 4 years old now, wearing a tiny tuxedo that matched Julian's. He looked adorable, with his dark hair slicked back. I walked down the aisle, not to a traditional march, but to an acoustic version of Here Comes the Sun. When I saw Julian waiting for me, tears in his eyes, I knew I was the luckiest woman alive. We exchanged vows. Julian put the ring on my finger, and as I turned my head to face the guests, I vaguely saw a familiar figure standing in the back of the crowd, half hidden by a large oak tree. It was Richard. He was wearing a suit that looked a few years old and slightly ill-fitting. He looked older, grayer. He was watching us with an expression of profound sadness and longing. I was stunned for a second, but I quickly snapped out of it. I looked back at Julian, my husband, and smiled happily. I wasn't going to let a ghost from the past ruin my future. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the reception area for champagne and cake. Leo was running around with the other kids, giggling. As we walked out of the makeshift chapel area, I saw 2 figures in the corner of the garden near the gate. One big and one small. My heart clenched. I nervously walked over, Julian right beside me. It was Richard. He was crouching down, talking to Leo. Richard was handing a piece of candy, a lollipop, to my chubby little son. Here you go, little guy, Richard was saying, his voice trembling slightly. He was staring at Leo's face with an intensity that was heartbreaking. He must have seen it. The nose, the chin, the shape of the eyes. Leo was clearly a mini version of Richard. There was no denying it. The DNA test Richard had refused 4 years ago was staring him right in the face. Richard's hand was shaking as he held out the candy. What's your name? Leo looked at the candy, then at Richard. He didn't take it. With a clear, childish voice, Leo said, Mommy and Daddy Julian said not to take things from strangers. Richard stiffened as if he had been slapped. His face went pale, then red. The rejection from his own flesh and blood, the boy calling another man daddy, hit him harder than any divorce paper could. I walked up, placing a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo, go play with daddy for a bit. I looked at Julian. He gave me a reassuring nod and held out his hand to Leo. Come on, buddy, Julian said. Let's go get some cake. Leo cheered and ran to Julian, grabbing his hand. Cake. Cake. They walked away, leaving me alone with Richard. Natalie, Richard said, his voice rough. He stood up, looking at the retreating figure of the boy. That kid, is he? It doesn't matter anymore, Richard, I said softly but firmly. He looks just like me, Richard whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. My God.
He's mine.
You weren't lying. I never lied to you, I said. You chose not to believe me. You chose to believe a vasectomy over your wife. You chose Valery over your family. I can fix this. Richard stepped forward, a desperate light in his eyes. I have rights. I'm his father. I can sue for custody. We can. Don't. I cut him off, my voice cold steel. You have no rights. You signed them away when you abandoned us. Julian is his father. Julian changed his diapers. Julian taught him to walk. Julian sat up with him when he had a fever. I stepped closer to him. You are just a stranger with a biological connection. And if you try to come near him, if you try to disrupt his life, I will use every penny of the $5 million you gave me to bury you in court. Julian will crush you. Do you really want to fight us? Richard slumped. He looked at Julian, who was lifting Leo up to cut the cake, both of them laughing. He saw the love there. A love he had thrown away. I made a mistake, Richard sobbed, covering his face with his hands. I lost everything. Yes, you did, I said. And you have to live with that.
Go home, Richard, I said. Don't show up in front of me again. Otherwise, you'll never find me. After I said that, I turned and walked away. I heard a sound like a sob behind me, but I didn't look back. I took one step at a time toward my love, toward my son, toward my life. My name is Julian. And I have loved Natalie since I was 10 years old. Most people think I met Natalie at a business gala, or that I only noticed her because she was Richard's wife. They think I went after her to spite my rival. They are wrong. My story begins 22 years ago. I was a scholarship kid at a prestigious private school. I was poor, skinny, and wore hand-me-down uniforms. The rich kids bullied me relentlessly. One day, they pushed me into a mud puddle and ruined my lunch. I was sitting behind the gymnasium, crying, trying to wipe the mud off my only pair of trousers. Then, a girl appeared. She was small, with messy hair and knees stained with grass. She wasn't the prettiest girl in class, that was her sister, Valery, who was always surrounded by admirers. This girl was quiet. Invisible. She didn't say a word. She just sat down next to me. She handed me half of her sandwich. And then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a crushed dandelion. "Flowers make things better," she had said seriously. "My mom says weeds are bad, but I think they are strong. They grow where people don't want them." She tucked the dandelion into my shirt pocket. "I'm Natalie," she said. "Don't cry. You're going to be strong like a weed." That day, I made a promise to myself. I would become strong. I would become rich. And one day, I would find the girl who gave me a weed when the world gave me mud. I worked my way up. I built my company from nothing. I became Richard's rival because I saw him treating her like an accessory. I saw him ignore her at parties. I saw the sadness in her eyes. I wanted to step in 1,000 times. But she was married. She was loyal. So I waited. I watched. I bought the house across the street in Harborview, hoping that maybe, one day, she would need a place to escape. When I saw her at the hospital that day, throwing out the porridge, I knew my chance had come. When I jumped in front of that car, I didn't think. I just knew that a world without her wasn't a world I wanted to live in. Now, watching her dance with our son, watching her laugh in the sunlight, I know that the boy who cried behind the gym finally won. She doesn't remember the boy with the mud on his pants. And that's okay. I remember for both of us. I walked up to her, wrapping my arms around her waist. She leaned back into me, content. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just thinking about how much I like dandelions," I smiled. "You're weird," she laughed, kissing me. I held her tight. My wife. My Natalie. The girl who saved me, and the woman I finally saved.